Welcome to the Strangers on the Way podcast. I am so excited to have today's guest. We went to high school together, and so I haven't talked to Ken Mooney in over a decade, which is wild. And so I'm just as excited as maybe our listeners will be. But Kenny is what we called him back then. Was hilarious, hilarious, brilliant, very smart back in high school, just solid character. And it seems like he's grown up to be that and more. And so, Ken, welcome to the podcast. Would you share just a little bit about yourself, your
Yeah,
modern day self with our listeners as we start?
sure. First, thank you so much for having me on. I was super surprised when I got the message. You're like, oh, like you've been popping up in my feed, and like you seem like very, super interesting. I was like, oh, I told my girlfriend Kylie. I was like, look, someone thinks I'm interesting. Like I told you, I'm an interesting person.
You are.
But yeah, so yeah, name's Ken Mooney. I live in Vernon Hills, Lake County area of Illinois. Uh, an eclectic background. I currently work as a customer success manager for a data protection company. So I spend a lot of time. I joke and I say, and I also was a special education teacher, but I tell people I basically do special education for corporations now.
I love it.
It's giving people goals, making sure that they're meeting them, and then wondering why it is that they're not meeting their goals like I did when I was working in education. But yeah, I was a learning behavior specialist before I moved into software. I coached high school football as well with actually another VH grad, Vince DeFrancisco.
Oh,
If you
yes.
remember Vince, he was the head
Awesome.
coach that I worked with for a while. And then before that, I was working in theater, and I still do improv. I still teach improv, but I was a stage fighter. I did a lot of Shakespeare. But yeah, so we went kind of theater improv to teaching improv to also being a teacher and a football coach. And now I
Hmm.
work in the corporate sector. Sold my soul, I guess some would
No.
say. But I enjoy what I'm doing. So
Yeah. We need everyone in every sector, right? That's
that's right.
awesome. I love one of my favorite things about you was, yeah, just your quick wit in theater and improv, and what have those experiences taught you? What have you gleaned from them? Like, I know you were sharing a little bit of wisdom before we hopped on the call, or the episode. Yeah, what about from that phase of life?
So much. Honestly, I tell people this too. Like, if you really want a great learning experience, not just for like, not in terms of just like obtaining a skill set or sharpening skills, but if you also want to learn a lot about yourself, I recommend anybody take improv. Whether it's a local improv house, like, for us, there's a place called Improv Playhouse in Libertyville. That's where I teach. But I mean, you have Improv Olympic, which is actually IO. You have the Second City. You have the Annoyance. If you're up in Wisconsin or even in Chicago, there's comedy sports. New York Upright Citizens Brigade. There are so many great places to learn, and it's definitely real. I mean, like aside from like people like, oh, you know how to be funny. It's like, I guess I do. I don't know. It's not really
You
what
just
my
are
focus
funny.
is when I'm yeah, but like just and we were talking about this earlier. I do what is called applied improv, which is you go in, you meet with a team at a company, like an AbbVie, let's say, and you teach like team building exercises. And look, if someone from that decides like, oh my God, I really love improv. Like I'm going to go to this local place and I'm going to try and take classes and audition. That's great. That's awesome. But really, it's trying to get people to uh, change their lens or see things through a different light that doesn't necessarily hammer like the work concept. Um, and like people have probably heard some of like so many of these rules before, but like the big one is yes and right. And I think when people hear yes and it's like, oh, agree to something and move forward. And what I like to teach is no, because we're not always going to agree on something. But what it is it's recognition of what's being said and finding a way forward. Sometimes we're going to agree on what on what you're asking. And like the example I gave, and there's like a couple of them, right? Like when I was coaching football, like you'd have a parent who's telling you, oh, like, well, like my kid's not starting. I really think they should start. Well, if I just agree to what you say, like,
Mm.
like I could put your kid in harm's way at that time, or I can maybe put another kid in harm's way. Or I can also acknowledge what you said. I understand that you want your kid to be starting, and I understand that you believe that they should be a starter. And at this time, we don't feel like they are a best fit for the role that we would need them for. And we assess the team throughout the entire week to try and put the best 11 on each side of the ball. And
Mhm.
I can provide to your student athlete what they need to improve on and how we can improve upon that so that this conversation or opportunity can be revisited. Right? It's the same thing with in business. You'll get people, especially for me and the sales reps I work with. So you're telling me you're not going to lower the cost. Yes, the cost is not going to be lowered, and what you are going to get out of this, whatever it may be. It's
Mm.
just being able to, like, I'm not gonna, like, even in teaching, right? Kid tell you I'm not gonna read this book. I'm not gonna argue with you, and
Mhm.
I'm not gonna sit back and go, oh my God, I can't believe this kid said this. Like, why would we argue about the moment? It happened. It's there. It's out in the world. Acknowledge it. You know, Great. You're not gonna read the book. Awesome. Everyone else, turn to this page. Why don't you do some independent reading for 10 minutes? You and me, we're gonna step outside and have a conversation.
Mhm.
Right? Like it's like I think that's a big one for me is yes and it, but really utilizing it in that way. And it's funny, like I'll have people who message me like on LinkedIn and be like, "Oh my God, it totally worked." I had this person who was pressing me on this, and I just said, yes, you are correct. That is exactly what I'm telling you. And like here's this, and because it just kind of
Mhm.
it gets rid of the passive aggressive
Yeah.
nature I think that some people can have, and it gets you right into like this is what we're doing, or this is how it has to be done, or like you're not going to throw a wrench in this machine for all the other 20 kids in this room. Like we
Yeah.
are moving forward. I'll acknowledge, maybe for the kid who doesn't want to read, right? Like, hey, like what's going on? What is it? Is it, because it could be, what if it's the content of the book?
Mm. Right.
Sometimes in school you read some books that get into some heavy stuff, maybe the content's rough for the kid. Maybe the kid has a hard time reading.
Yeah.
Maybe the kid was working until 11 o'clock at night because they've got to give some of their money to their mom or their parents or whomever to help pay the bills, pay rent, pay more, whatever it may be, right? Like all of a sudden, instead of arguing with the why did you do that, it's just like what is going on, and
Yeah.
letting everything, just finding that way to move forward. So I think that's a big one.
Yes.
And I could stop here. I'm
No,
totally
it's so
rambling right
good.
now.
No, I love it.
Talk a lot about the rule. And that's a big one I use, especially with football. Because when I became a football coach, I was like when I first became it, they were like Ken Mooney, the actor, like the guy, he wants to be a football coach. But
Mm.
like the rule is something you learn in improv. If you have a short form game like sit, stand, kneel, in order for that game to be successful, the first thing you need is you need your who are we? You need your where are we? You need your what are we doing? And that's really any scene. Like you should always, if you're ever doing scenes, those are the first, like right away. They don't have to be funny. It doesn't. It's brother and sister at the ice cream parlor mopping the floors.
Mm.
None of that is overly interesting, but we don't need those things to be interesting. We just need them to be established so that we can maybe create something interesting. But then,
Mm.
in sit, stand, kneel, we need a player sitting, we need a player standing, we need a player kneeling. And then within that game, we need people to change positions so that chaos can occur. If you establish your who, what, where, and if you utilize the rules that you have set out, you're going to have success. Now, the scenes are always going to vary, right? It's
Mm.
all made up, right? So if I run sit, stand, kneel during a 7 o'clock show, it's going to be completely different than the 9 o'clock show that I
Sure.
have, but I still have those rules there. And it's the same thing for work. Like I talk a lot with people like, well, what's the rule? What's the thing you can replicate? You may not always have the same business objective that is written out. And you need to have a business objective. So that's
Mm.
a rule. Like when you meet with the customer, establish the business objective, establish the goal, establish the time frame,
Mm.
right? All those things they're gonna vary
Yeah.
between the different people you work with, but you get to have those rules. Or when I was coaching football and I was coaching offense, I would be able to develop more plays in the playbook. And it's because when I was working with Vince, we had a lot of what we call back motion, which is when a back will motion, but they motion behind like the quarterback or behind the running back that's behind the quarterback. Well, I was like, okay, well, the rule is actually that this back can go in motion. That's the rule. We don't always have them, to go behind us. So it's like, well, if that's the case, we can motion this guy across and we can put him in this gap. And now we have an extra blocker right there, ready to go, easy block on either a first level player or a second level player, right? And it's like, oh yeah, like like I didn't think about that. It's like, yeah, because so many coaches will get locked up in their theory and the philosophy, but they don't look at the individual things going on and go, okay, well, what are the rules that we've established for all of these players, and then what can we how do we utilize those? Like some people, I think, see rules as like a fence or a shackle,
Mm,
right? Oh, I always have to do this. No, that's something you do to have success.
mm,
Like it's
it's
like
good.
tag, like stay in bounds. When you get tagged, you're frozen. If we have kids running out of bounds and no one freezes when they're tagged, we're gonna have a really crummy game of tag. But if we have the in bounds and out of bounds areas and kids freeze and we know that like it's gonna reset after some, you're gonna have fun.
Yeah,
It's going to work.
so good.
So I would say like those are like for me like big ones are yes and acknowledge what's happening, find a way forward,
Hmm.
right? And then what's the rule? Know the rule, expose the rule. If you can learn those, and that's why I recommend taking an improv class. You're gonna find success for sure.
You can tell that you have like a leadership gifting on your life. And how would you translate that into like someone who's leading a team? Like, how would you translate that? Establishing the rule, knowing what the rule is. Like, does that make sense? Like, how do you
Yeah. It,
contextualize
it's
that?
it's telling people too. And we were talking about this also, like the story of like balancing the stick. And this basically like really quickly is, I had a professor who we were doing Our Town first week of rehearsal. He's just like, hey, we're just gonna don't bring your scripts. We're just gonna be moving about in the space. And he had us all balancing sticks. Like your first rule, right? You learn is in order to balance a stick in your hand, you have to look at its highest point. The moment I even look down at my palm, look at self, we're gonna lose balance, right? So boom, now we can balance the stick in my hand. I can put it on one finger. I can put it like on the back side of my hand. I can stand up, sit down, all of these things. So then we try to now have you and me are working together, where I'm going to have the stick in my hand and I'm going to communicate with you like, hey, are you ready? I'm going to drop this stick, and I try to drop the stick into the palm of your hand so that then you can balance it. And we learned that we both have to have our focus on the stick. And you also learn from the people who are watching you that no one's actually watching us. And and we by the way, we look ridiculous because we are two grown people just trying to get a stick from one palm to the other, but everyone's looking at the stick, right? Everyone's looking at the moment. And so when I think about that, and I think about like the rule and like yes and um, it, it's a lot about looking outside of yourself, right? It's not, so like we talk about like leadership, and it's not how am I going to lead. It's like what do people, how do these people need to be led, right? Like when I would coach receivers, I talk a lot about the why of something. Like I'm not just going to have a drill for you. As we're doing the drill, I'm going to explain to you what it is that we're doing, why it is that we're doing it this way, like down to the littlest things. Like I'd have them, like, when they're playing catch like 10 yards away, I would tell them you need to have your hands out. Your hands need to be out. And I would, I'd go, here you go, guys, physics lesson from your English teacher. You have a ball that's coming at you. It has velocity. If I have my hands here, well, I don't have a whole lot of space to accept velocity. And I'm a receiver. I'm not a catcher. I'm not a snagger. I'm a receiver. So if I have my hands out and I've got this ball that's being thrown at me, I can receive what is catching. I can reduce, the like me taking on that velocity by giving myself and my body that time to really bring it in. Whereas you would see kids having their hands close to their body and then they bring them out. Like, guys, like this thing's coming at you, and then you're going to come at it. It's that's not the best thing. So like there's a reason why I'm telling you we want to have our hands out, because this is what's going to happen on this, or like, hey, we're gonna come out, we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna do fire outs. You're gonna get into your stance, and we're gonna do 10 of these. The reason why we are doing this is we want to make sure that our first however many steps, that initial explosion step, it always looks the same. You want to keep the cornerback, safety, whatever who's on you. You want to keep them on your, on their heels, not knowing what you're going to do. So it's that constant thing of like, I know what needs to be done. So how do I get them to understand this, right? Same thing with teaching. Like, I know about the gate compromise of 1820. So when I'm teaching it, it's not about me expressing my knowledge of that compromise. It's what does this group of people need to know moving forward, so that when we get to the next point in history, like, this is why we learned about this. This is why we did it in this kind of fashion. It's if you really put your focus on other people,
Yeah.
they're gonna give you the answer. Which when we start focusing on what do I have to do, what do I have to speak on, that's when we get ourselves into a rut, because all we're focused on is
Yeah.
ourself, as opposed to who we're speaking to, who it is we're coaching, who it is we're working with. If you just have that them first mentality, it's gonna be a lot easier for you. Sometimes it stinks because you may not be working with someone who reciprocates that back and has their focus on you.
Sure.
But like it does to me, it makes that process of whether it's teaching, whether it's customer success, whether it's improvising, no matter what it is, what do I see outside of me, and what does what I see outside of me need in this moment, and then can I fulfill that? Can I? And then you can go like, yeah, I can do that. I can do it by doing this. Or you go, you know what? I'm not the person for that. I have this resource. There is this resource though. There is this other, I may not teach the linemen, and they may come to me with a question about like 3-point stance or something. Well, I hear you, and I know you need to learn about this particular aspect of the game. So let me get you in contact with this coach here, so that they can go ahead and they can provide that information, right? Yeah, I don't know if that really answered the question. I
No,
kind of
it's
just went on like
so
a
good.
little like TED talk,
No, I
but
love it. How did you get to that place of them first? Have you kind of always been outward focused like that? Or because I think it's interesting. I work with young adults and we're training them. Just even right now, in a couple weeks, they're going to preach for the first time, and they're very nervous because they're like, "Oh my goodness, I have to, get it all correct." And it's like it is I, and it's their first time, so I understand. But one of the things that I tell them is like, think about the audience, like what they need, and what, like, you're delivering a message that is going to really help develop them. And it's like, if you can get your eyes on the audience instead of your own skill set or fears, like, it does shift, and then it's more fun, I would say, too.
yeah,
But how did you get to be in that place? Like,
I think it's just the eclectic. I've been lucky to, I think, have ADHD and want to do just a lot of different things.
Yeah.
I did play football. I play a little volleyball. I ran track. I did theater. I did improv.
Yeah.
And a lot of those things, they're not in isolation. I mean, even
Yeah.
track, there is team points. I can win the 100-meter dash at conference. We can also win conference, right?
Yeah.
You can also win the sectional as a team. You can win state as a team. And but I do think it's just all of those different experiences, and then just through them, you learn, like, even a show like when I was in high school, my senior year, we did Amadeus. Oh, and Matt Nurnberger did what was a lot of people were in the show. I think it was like a cast of like 20 people, but most of the dialogue, I would say 80% of the dialogue was covered by myself playing Amadeus and Matt playing Salieri. Well, there's 16 other people in this show, and so it's like, okay, like, what does this, for that, it's like, okay, what do these people need that, like, when they do get their moment, like, I'm very spatially aware, so like I would always be very mindful of like, okay, well, this person's speaking and they're upstage of me and I am literally blocking them right now. And it could be, and it's like, I don't have to do something drastic. It's as easy as if I just do this, if I just lean in like my head, a foot, I'm going to give this person frame so that now they can be seen. And it's just wanting to not have a it's not, and again, like it's the I thing. Like, I don't need to have a great performance. This needs to be a great show. We need to perform well. And so in order to do that, you want to make sure like everyone knows what they're doing, that people are off book, that we know where, the props are. In football, it's the same thing. Like, I think for both of them too, like I've also done ugly work in both of them. When I played football for a few years, I wasn't always just a receiver who got to be out there and like catch balls and score a touchdown. I had to block, in isolation on an island where it's me and another guy, and it's very clear who wins and loses in that competition. Or I blocked punts, like, what do we need to win? It's not always going to be fun. In theater, when I got to ISU, your first semester, you don't audition for shows. My work was backstage. I cleaned paintbrushes for my first 18 weeks at for the School of Theater. But you learn, like, even in that, like, yeah, like, why am I going to clean this brush? Because this brush is made with horsehair, and this is an $18 brush, and there's 100 of these things in this paint shop. And if we get 100 of these paintbrushes that become crusty and they're not usable after a few weeks, well, now we're going to spend $1,800 on paintbrushes. Theater budget's already tight. You know what I mean? So like, you learn, like, even that is not like, I may not be delivering a line on stage when I'm cleaning paintbrushes, but what I am going to do is keep paintbrushes clean so that the next crew that has work to be done can do it, can do it effectively. And
So,
I've had that opportunity of, I actually like playing like, I had directors, especially the grad directors, if they had small weird roles, they would just come to me and be like, "Hey, would you play this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'll do that." I mean, like, I literally played a character for like a one act that I was like a little troll, and I would sweep the ground, and then I drank milk out of a saucer. Like, that was being done while I'm in a show in college where I'm like on the marquee of like the university's CPA, right? But it's like,
yeah.
like, you need, what's that? You need a troll person for 20 minutes? Like, yeah, I'm your troll. Like, I'll do that. Oh, you need someone to play Alan Strang? Yeah, I want that. I'll go ahead and I'll do that too.
So,
But I think it is just all those eclectic experiences and having opportunities where you're, for lack of a better phrase, you're the guy,
yeah.
right? The person who's expected to deliver. And then sometimes you're just a part of the whole ensemble. And either way, you still have a job that has to get done so that we can have total success. And I think just having that range of having opportunities where I'm really counted on and asked to perform at a high level and like a primary role, but then also asked to perform at a high level in something that no one's going to see.
Yeah.
No one was watching me clean paintbrushes. Like, that was not on the playbill. I was not even listed on the, like, no one knows, but it
Yeah.
doesn't matter. I do. And I know that other productions get to, do the things that they need to do because I took care of what mattered.
Yeah. How did you become like this, Ken Mooney? Because a lot of society isn't like this. They're like, I want the star role and I want it now. Like, who instilled this in you?
I don't know. I like to say that I have my father's head, my mother's heart. Um,
Oh, love
I think
that.
if you were to like ask them, I think there's always been a level of this. I've always been a
Yeah.
pretty empathetic person.
Yeah.
Um, I think like just having ADHD, being someone with ADHD, having dyslexia, and just like knowing my own struggles, knowing that life is hard. And like, and Kylie and I have also talked about this. I think w- there we all experience in some way some sort of like a negative, a traumatic experience, whatever the degree of traumatic is. There's,
Yeah.
it's traumatic can be a spectrum, but we make choices as humans.
Yeah.
Like, we can either face those negative moments and then we can take our pain and frustration out on the world, which I think we see a lot of,
Yeah.
or you can be someone who says, I experienced that and I don't want anyone, I don't want anyone else to experience it. Or
Mm.
I am going to be a vessel to make sure that when I do see someone in that moment, that I'm going to be of service
Yeah.
to them, or I'm going to try and help them fight that battle. Um, but I think it's just something I, I just sort of innately had. I don't know if that
Yeah.
sounds like I
No,
don't
it's
know if that
awesome.
sounds like arrogant or not. I don't mean
No,
to,
it's
but like
beautiful.
I've always cared. You know, like I was talking to a couple of account teams because I'm new at my company, and I had to
Yeah.
tell them like, hey, look, like I care. Like I care about these accounts. Like I know that I don't get a huge kickback on a sale like you do, but that's not why I'm, you know,
Yeah.
I'm not here like, yeah, I want to get paid, but I'm here because I care. And if I didn't care, I would go find something else to do. I got ADHD. I got, you know, I got it's hard enough to
You
stay
got
focused on the things
options.
I'm passionate about. So if I'm not passionate about it, you know, I'm out. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
I'm not gonna BS anybody. Um, but no,
So,
I just always kind of been like try to create what's the best way to create a positive moment.
yeah. That's so good. That's very, very inspiring. I know you'd mentioned having ADHD and dyslexia. Any like just lessons that you've learned? It sounds like you were sharing a couple of things before we started recording just about how you've approached life and like, I mean, you work really hard. It it sounds like to in opportunities, and so yeah, just like anything you've learned from experiencing that in your lifetime.
Yeah, I think and I also benefited away from I come from a big family. I have two older brothers, I got a younger brother, and I have two younger sisters as well. Livy and Addison are both adopted, but I have three biological brothers, and my brothers are smart. Like they are smart people. Like my one of my Justin is just super smart guy. He was book smart all throughout school. Like he would like literally wouldn't have to like study, and the guy was getting like
Mm,
A's and B's, mostly A's in like AP classes. Meanwhile, I've got an IEP and I'm sweating it out in like a
yeah.
basic English class when the teacher's like, "All right, everybody, we're gonna like go around the room and everyone's gonna read a paragraph." Um, and I think like one of the things that it's like taught me that I try to like just tell other people is it's not about how long it's going to take you to do something. Because you
Mm,
know what, if you handed my brother a book and then he handed me the same book and he handed us the same 5 questions, I'm probably going to take 2 hours.
mhm.
He's going to maybe be able to do it in 30 minutes, but that's that's what it is, you
Yeah.
know. So I feel like, you know, when I was either in school or then when I was teaching, you get people wrapped up just in that concept where it doesn't matter, like it doesn't matter, it takes me 2 hours because it's not going to
Mhm.
take me 2 hours forever, you know, but it is going to take it right now. And at the end of the day, you have to get something done, you know. And I already tell people about it, like with the weight room, you know, like when I was coaching football, like, oh well, so and so's benching 150, I'm only benching 100 pounds. Well, he's been coming in for 8 weeks straight. He's also 5'10" and weighs 170. You just got here. You're 5'4" and you weigh a buck 14. So
Mhm.
let's also address that part of it too,
Yeah.
right? Like, and who cares? That's their workout's not your workout.
Mhm.
It doesn't. Your workout says nothing about you except for the fact that you're here. You're here and
Mhm.
you're trying to get stronger. So show up, get stronger, and then you know what? You're gonna get to the point where you're benching more.
Mhm.
Um, and so I think that's like, especially with like dyslexia, because I did like I had to. It was going to take me longer to read things. You
Yeah.
know, for when I was doing shows, I wasn't going to go into a show and and read the script cold. Why would I do that to myself? Right. And I can sit there and go, well, it's so much easier for everybody else. Like they don't have this. They can go in and read this thing easily. Like, no, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to memorize the script. I'm going to memorize, you know, and then like that skill got more honed in where I started then going, okay, I noticed that directors pick scenes that will mix up the characters so that they can see mix and match. Oh,
Hmm.
I know that they will pick something near the climactic point. Oh, and then it really became like, oh,
Mm.
you know what?
Wow.
I bet they're going to pick this scene, this scene, this scene, and this scene. I'm going to make sure I have these scenes memorized, because this one is with the mom, this one is with the dad. Oh, this is
Mhm.
leading up to that climactic moment. And it just went from I'm going to memorize the whole thing to adapting the skill to then being able to say like, okay, when I read this script, I know, or I'm like very certain these are the ones they're going to read. And then lo and
Wow.
behold, you show up and it's like, yeah, that's the side. Like
Wow.
that's what it is. And so it's all those areas. Like, yeah, it'll take me 2 hours now, but maybe 6 weeks from now, maybe it takes me an hour and 40.
Yeah.
If I think that's improvement,
Yeah.
right? And so yeah, it's just like I think those really taught me like I can't in that area I talk a lot about like, focus on the other. In that regard, can't focus on other people
Yeah.
because you're just gonna end up, disappointed, upset, or angry when you have an objective that you need to address and you need
Hmm.
to accomplish.
Yeah. That's so good. Yeah, I love how you said like kind of stay in your lane, like don't look at the other
Yeah.
in that respect. Just look at yourself as you improve. Yeah, that's really good. Just as we close, I would love to hear like some of your favorite shows or improv moments or anything that you've just loved throughout your career.
I
Or
mean,
sports moments, championship
uh,
moments.
favorite show I think one of and like that I've ever done was it was called Equus. I don't know if you recall this or not. Daniel Radcliffe, who's
Uh-huh.
Harry Potter. Do you remember
Yep.
when everyone was freaking out because he was playing a character where he used to have to get naked on stage? I don't know if
Yes.
you remember this or not.
Is
That's the
it
show. It's Equus.
you were
So
naked?
yes, I was
Oh my
in front
goodness.
of a lot of people. But
Wow.
that was a show. I read that when I was. And the reason why I say it's like for me is like the pinnacle. Where I was basically like when I was like 22, I was like I never have to perform again. Like I have achieved the thing I wanted. I read
Yeah.
the play when I was 14, and I was like, oh wow, like wouldn't it be awesome if like if you got to do this? But that it's so tough. Like one, I was never going to do it in high school, right? Because of the nature of the show.
Sure.
So there goes 4 years right there where it's not going to happen. And then like the next place where it would feasibly happen would be college. But it's like, what are the odds? I mean, there's
Yeah, yeah.
there's thousands of plays, right? And so it was like February, I think of like my junior year, February of my junior year, and like one of the actors who in the School of Theater was also on the board for like selecting shows, and he like turned around and he was like, "Hey, just want to pick your brain. Like, what would your thoughts be if I told you we're probably doing Equus?" And I was like,
Wow.
we're doing it. And so um, like
Wow.
while everyone else was like partying like all summer, I basically hung out in my apartment like by myself for like the entire summer and just hammered in the script and got locked in, and then got the role. So it was really just like a dream come true. So favorite
Wow.
show is definitely that. It's
Wow.
also just Peter Schaffer is a great writer. He wrote Amadeus as well.
Yeah.
I tell people like if you want to read great plays, Peter Schaffer plays are awesome.
Yes.
Um, Improv, it's really I like teaching now more than I
Mhm.
like performing. I mean, I'll perform. I'm going to be doing a couple of things in February. I'm actually going to audition for a team now that I'm back in the area. But
Cool.
it's for me, it's when you see people like that they're not performers, right? It's the guy that works at like Baxter Laboratories or something
Yes.
who's just like coming in because he's like I want to not be afraid when I'm up in front of people, and they
Yeah.
have like this brilliant moment, like where you can totally tell like for at least that one moment in a scene, like it totally clicked for them, where like they either delivered something that was true and funny, or they established a really strong who, what, or where. That's probably my favorite thing to see. That's all. I mean, just teaching in general really is like when people get the aha moment, and
Yeah.
even like they too are like oh, and like everyone else in the class is like, oh man, like Michael got it, like oh my god, like he
Yes.
didn't ask a question, he made a statement. Um, that's really something I really like a lot that I still get a kick out of. Um, Probably honestly more so with adults than with the kids. because
Sure.
it does bring out like a childlike
Mm,
excitement out of adults, which I think is like we sort of miss
yeah.
as we get older.
Yeah.
Um, but I would say like yeah, favorite show is Equus. It's a great show. Peter Schaffer's a great writer. And then yeah, watching people when they get that aha moment, when something clicks, when they're actually, whether it's establishing a strong scene or actually, saying something that gets people
Yeah.
laughing, is I really enjoy that.
So neat. It's neat how you can like become an expert in a craft and then teach the craft. Like, I
Yeah,
think
it's
that's beautiful.
yeah, it's a lot of fun. So I'm very I joke that I get paid for a hobby.
Yeah.
Really, I would do it for free.
Yeah.
Sometimes I even tell people like I'll just like do this, and they're like, no, legally we have to pay you. I'm like,
Mm.
all right, fine.
You're like, okay.
All right, twist my arm. But no, I do. I love it a lot and then when I see people utilizing it too, or talking about like, yeah, I was at work and like
Mm.
this happened and I decided like I was gonna yes and this.
Yeah.
Or, like I was like, like I figured out this rule here and I'm now replicating that in my day. It's really exciting to see and hear
Yeah.
about.
That's so good. Okay, last question. If
Yeah.
someone is like just beginning like improv or just joining a sports team for the first time or like starting something new, what advice do you have for them just in general? Any like wisdom as they step into something new?
And it's again, it's Shakespeare, a lot of analogies. I say this at work too, because again, I'm pretty new at my company.
Yeah.
Um, get on the diving board
Hmm.
and just know that you're going to jump and you're going to land in the water somewhere between a dive and a belly flop.
Hmm.
But know that you're going to get into the water, and that's with anything. And that's all. It's really just been a big approach of mine. Is yeah, if you want to get into football, you know, it's going to be tough. You may not get it like right away. It's a confusing sport, but dive into it as much as you can. Ask questions. Go out there, you know, with a bit of a reckless abandon
Hmm.
and learn. Like sometimes you're going to make a play. Sometimes you're going to get lit up,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
if you're going to take an improv class, like listen to what's being said. Go up there, make a fool out of yourself. You'll come to find out everybody is.
Yeah.
And like in those situations, people are for you. If you are going to join, if you're going to try and play basketball, if you're going to try and do theater, if you're going to try and paint or whatever it is, you're going to join the scholastic team, whatever.
Yeah.
People are for you.
Yes.
They're
Yes.
not against you. And if they are against you, you're with the wrong people. You're in the wrong room, right? So like if you're performing, you're like, do you ever go see a movie and go, man, I hope this movie's crap. I just paid $15. I want to sit for an hour and 50, like 2 hours and watch the worst film I've ever watched in my entire life. No, no one says that. Like that, if you did that, that'd be weird. You need to go see a therapist, right? Like if you're public speaking, people want you to be successful
Yeah.
at public speaking. If you're going to play football, the coaches want the next athlete. Like they want that, like to go, whoa, cool. We actually have a quarterback. We have a receiver. We have a linebacker. If you're gonna if you're gonna get in art, the teacher, the art club, whatever, supervisor, whatever it is, they're gonna want to see great artwork because they want, or for at least something that you can express yourself so that we can have that conversation. People, when you start participating in these activities, people want you to be successful. And if there are people that don't, well, like don't pay attention to them, because their intentions aren't great. Their intentions are for themselves, and they're probably having their own struggles or their own issues that they got to battle with. But if you're gonna do it, you're on the diving board, jump. You're gonna land somewhere between
Hmm.
that dive and a belly flop, but you're getting in the water. Like you
Yeah.
told yourself you wanted to. So go do it. And especially if you're young. What's the worst thing that happens? Well, football's not for me. Okay, cool. Like,
Yeah.
uh, you know,
Yeah.
soccer wasn't for me. Like I'm 36 years old. I play golf. It's not, I'm terrible at it. It probably will never be for me, but I'm going to keep doing it
Yeah.
because, you know,
Yeah.
but yeah, that would be my recommendation is jump in, dive in,
So good.
fail. Who cares? You
Hmm.
know, Sun
So,
rises and it sets, and if it doesn't, then the least of our concerns is the bad stick figure drawing that you had, right? We got bigger problems on our hands.
right.
So that would be like my word of advice. You're on the board, jump in
Jump
because
in.
you're already there, right?
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
so good. It's so good. I feel like you're someone who like helps people break through even fear. Like I could just feel like momentum as you spoke. So
awesome.
thank
Yeah,
you. It's so neat to hear about all of your different experiences, and I feel like they have this like thread through them. They're all like, I don't know, everything you've done, you've pulled out life lessons. So thank you so much for just sharing them with us today.
absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I hope that you can get maybe 30 minutes
Oh,
of
it was
coherent
so
thought.
good. No, really good thoughts. Thank you so much, Ken. Good.
Yeah, thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.